The office hummed with its usual rhythm. Keyboards clattering, printers whirring, the faint murmur of voices bleeding through gray cubicle walls. It was another late evening, the kind where the fluorescent lights felt harsher, colder, like they were conspiring to keep me awake long after my body begged for rest. I stared at the spreadsheet glowing on my screen. The numbers blurred, my vision doubling and then sharpening again. My head pulsed with the dull ache I had been ignoring for weeks. Coffee cups stacked at the corner of my desk told the story better than I could. Too many deadlines, too little sleep. But I pushed on. That's what I always did. Push harder, work longer, prove myself. Then the first warning hit, a sharp sting in my chest, quick like a pinprick. I pressed a hand against it, convincing myself it was nothing. A skipped meal, too much caffeine, maybe anxiety. But the pain returned, stronger this time, spreading like fire up to my shoulder and down my arm. The room tilted. My ears rang. "Hey, are you okay?" A coworker's voice floated toward me, muffled and distant as though I were underwater. I wanted to answer. I wanted to say, "I'm fine, just tired," but the words stuck in my throat. My fingers slipped off the keyboard. Papers scattered to the floor as my body sagged against the desk. Then the world went black. When I opened my eyes, everything was too bright. White lights blazed above me, sterile and unforgiving. The air smelled of antiseptic and plastic. My body felt heavy, weighed down by invisible chains. A steady beeping sound pulsed in my ears, slow, steady, relentless. I turned my head, groggy, and saw wires taped to my chest, an IV feeding fluid into my arm. My heart was not beating on its own rhythm anymore. The machine beside me dictated its pace. "You're awake," a nurse said softly, appearing at my side. Her face was calm but tired, like she had seen this scene far too many times before. "You collapsed at work," she continued. "Your coworkers called an ambulance. You had a cardiac event. Stress, exhaustion, it caught up to you." Her words sank slowly like stones into water. "Cardiac event. I was 26. People my age weren't supposed to hear that." "You're lucky," she added. "If they hadn't called when they did." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Lucky. The word echoed hollow in my skull. I lay still, the truth pressing down on me harder than the hospital blankets. My body had been screaming at me for months. The migraines. The dizziness. The chest tightness I brushed aside as stress, and I ignored it all. Because resting felt impossible. Because saying no was never an option. Because I believed pushing through made me stronger. But now, lying here, tethered to machines just to stay alive, I realized the truth. Pushing hadn't made me strong. It had broken me, and this time I wasn't sure I could be put back together. The first night in the hospital passed in a blur of monitors and interrupted sleep. Nurses slipped in and out, checking vitals, adjusting IV drips. Every time I woke, my chest ached, not just from the episode, but from something heavier, something deeper. Still, a small hope kept me breathing. The doctors had said they called my parents. I clung to that thought like a life raft. Surely by morning I told myself they would be here. I pictured my mom rushing in, worried eyes brimming with tears. Dad pacing in the hallway, trying to act strong but cracking the moment he saw me awake. But morning came, and the hallway remained empty. By noon, the nurse peeked in, smiling gently. "Any family coming to visit?" she asked. I hesitated. My throat tightened. "They should be," I whispered, more to myself than to her, but they weren't. By evening, the truth began to press harder. The doctor stopped by, reminding me I needed rest, that family support would help with recovery. His words stung like salt in an open wound. Family support. The phrase mocked me. Still, I held on to excuses. Maybe they didn't get the call. Maybe they were on their way. Maybe traffic, maybe. Then my phone lit up. Relief surged as I reached for it, expecting a voicemail or a worried text. But it wasn't that. It was a notification. Instagram. I froze, my finger trembling as I unlocked the screen. There it was. A photo of my parents and my siblings, all smiling by a lake, the sun setting perfectly behind them. Mom's arm around Melissa. Dad holding up a drink. My younger sister Paige flashing a peace sign. The caption made my stomach drop. Family day without the drama. My vision blurred, not from dizziness this time, but from tears. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then unlocked it again, hoping I had misread. But no, it was there, mocking me, public, deliberate. They hadn't just ignored me. They hadn't just failed to show up. They had celebrated my absence. The walls around me felt closer, the air thinner. I wanted to scream, but the sound died in my throat. Machines kept beeping, steady and cold, as though they were the only ones who cared whether I was alive. For years, I had told myself I was important to them, that sacrificing my time, my health, my money, it all meant something, that my place in this family depended on how much I could give. But now, in this sterile hospital room, I saw the truth with blinding clarity. I wasn't their daughter. I wasn't their sister. I was an inconvenience, a liability, a burden they were glad to shed. And as the night stretched on, the glow of that post etched itself into my memory. Family day without the drama. The words cut deeper than any diagnosis. For the first time in my life, I realized what it felt like to be completely abandoned. The morning after the Instagram post, I woke to the relentless chirp of my phone, notifications stacked one on top of the other, 70 missed calls, dozens of unread texts. For a moment I thought maybe finally they cared. Maybe guilt had set in, maybe they realized what they'd done. My fingers trembled as I unlocked the screen, but the messages weren't what I hoped for. From Dad, "We need you. Call immediately." From Mom, "Fix this now before it gets worse." From Melissa, "My card declined. Did you cut the transfer? This isn't funny." From Paige, "Please, I need the rent money. Don't punish me for what others did." Not one asked, "Are you okay?" Not one said, "We're worried about you." Not one mentioned the hospital. Just demands, orders, expectations. I set the phone down, staring at the ceiling tiles. That was the moment the threads began to unravel. Lying there, I started connecting dots I had ignored for years. The constant emergencies that only I could solve. The bills that mysteriously appeared in my name. The credit cards that never seemed to belong to me but always carried my responsibility. I thought back to the months leading up to this collapse. Mom had called, her voice sharp with panic. "If I miss another car payment, they'll take it. You don't want me stranded, do you?" I transferred the money instantly, telling myself it was just this once. Then Dad. His mortgage had slipped through the cracks. He said he couldn't risk losing the house. The weight of disappointment in his voice left me with no choice. My credit card carried the burden. Melissa's emergencies came in waves. Tuition shortfall, medical bill, rent gap. But every time the photos that followed told a different story. New handbags, vacations, nights out. I told myself not to notice. I told myself she needed help, and Paige, sweet youngest Paige. She always framed it as if I was saving her from drowning. "Just this month. I'll pay you back." But repayment never came. One by one, their voices replayed in my mind, each laced with guilt, each tying my worth to what I could give. I thought I was being loyal. I thought it was what family did. But in that hospital bed, hooked up to machines because my body had finally given out, the illusion shattered. They didn't love me for me. They loved me for what I provided. I wasn't their daughter, their sister. I was their safety net, their ATM, their excuse not to take responsibility for their own lives. I had been conditioned to believe saying no made me selfish. But the truth was simpler, sharper, undeniable. My sacrifice wasn't love. It was exploitation. The realization sat heavy on my chest, worse than any cardiac monitor could measure. Because if love had conditions, if loyalty only flowed one way, then what I had wasn't family, it was a cage. And for the first time, I saw the bars clearly. The night after I cut off the automatic transfers, the silence in my room was deafening. My phone buzzed nonstop with demands, threats, manipulations, but I let it ring out. Screen glowing face down on the nightstand. For the first time, I chose not to respond. Still, a weight pressed against my ribs. Loneliness sharper than the IV needle in my arm. I had been stripped down to nothing. Not a daughter, not a sister, not even a person in their eyes. Just a failed resource. That was when my gaze landed on a single name in my contacts. One I hadn't dialed in months, Grandpa. He had warned me for years. "Don't let them drain you dry, Evelyn. They'll keep taking until there's nothing left." I'd brushed him off, embarrassed, even resentful. I thought he was being bitter, cynical. I wanted to believe my family just needed me a little more, that their wait was temporary. But now I knew better. My thumb hovered, heart racing. Then I pressed call. He picked up on the second ring. No hesitation. No pleasantries. Just a steady, grounding voice. "Which hospital?" Not what happened. Not why didn't you call sooner. Pure action. Pure presence. 40 minutes later, the door opened and there he was. Same worn windbreaker he'd had for years. The same old wristwatch ticking steadily, like it had outlived every false promise my parents ever made. He didn't rush to hug me. He didn't smother me with questions. He just sat down in the chair beside the bed and studied me quietly, his eyes carrying the kind of understanding that needed no words. Finally, he said softly, "So, they finally broke you too, huh?" Something cracked inside me. I didn't have to explain. He already knew. The hours that followed felt different from anything I had lived through in years. He asked the nurse questions I hadn't even thought to ask, about medication, recovery time, long-term risks. He scribbled notes, nodding firmly, never once making me feel like a burden. When the billing department knocked on the door, he stepped forward before I could even reach for my wallet. Later, he pulled a tablet out of his bag. "Let's take a look," he said, scrolling through my bank statements. Together, we untangled the web. 5 loans in my name, 3 maxed-out credit cards, utility bills for houses I didn't live in, even a car insurance policy for a vehicle I didn't drive. Each line item was a blade, cutting through the fog I had been drowning in. I felt sick, ashamed, ready to crumble under the realization that I had allowed this. But Grandpa just sighed, leaned back in his chair, and said words that landed deep in my bones. "Loyalty only means something when it's returned. They don't see you, Evelyn. They see what you can give. And that's not love. That's theft dressed as family." For the first time, I didn't argue. I believed him. And in that belief, a seed of something I hadn't felt in years took root. Strength. The morning after Grandpa's visit, the decision came quietly. Not in a dramatic burst, not in a fit of rage. Just a stillness in my chest, a clarity sharper than any scalpel. It was time to cut the cords. Grandpa arrived with coffee, his expression steady, almost businesslike. He set the cup on my tray and said, "You've been keeping them alive at your expense. That ends today. We started simple. Melissa's automatic transfer canceled. For years, her emergencies had been my responsibility. But 3 vacations to Miami didn't look like survival anymore. My finger hovered over the confirm button for a long moment. Then I pressed it. The screen went blank. Just like that, her lifeline was gone. Next came Paige's rent deposit. I had covered her for so long I couldn't even remember the last time she'd stood on her own. With a few taps, that cord snapped too. Mom's car insurance unlinked. Dad's mortgage payments flagged. Passwords changed. Co-signed loans reported. With each cut, the weight on my chest grew lighter. I wasn't just untying knots. I was dismantling a system. One they had built on my back. The fallout was immediate. By evening, my phone lit up in a frenzy. Mom's voicemail hit first, her voice sharp and cold. "I don't know what you're trying to prove, Evelyn, but this isn't how family behaves." Melissa followed with venom. "Are you insane? My account's at $34, fix this now." Then Paige, her tactics softer, guilt-soaked. "I don't know why you're punishing me for what others did. I just want peace. Please don't abandon me like this." And finally, Dad, his words like a hammer, cold and commanding. "You're about to destroy everything we've built. Call me immediately. Everything we built." The words twisted in my gut, because the truth was undeniable. They hadn't built anything. I had. Every missed bill I covered, every debt I carried, every sacrifice I made, it was my scaffolding, my silent work, holding up their illusion of stability. They built nothing. I had been the foundation, and now I was walking away. I set the phone down, screen buzzing like a trapped insect. For the first time, I didn't rush to fix it. I didn't bend. I didn't cave. The only sound in the room was the steady beeping of the monitor, reminding me of the one thing I had nearly lost trying to keep them afloat: my own life. I realized then, this wasn't rebellion. It wasn't revenge, it was survival. And as the notifications piled higher, demanding, pleading, threatening, I chose silence. Because silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was power. It was freedom. The break had come. And this time it was final. The first morning home felt different. Not loud or triumphant, just quiet. For once, my body didn't jolt awake to the dread of emails, alarms, and endless obligations. Sunlight spilled across the curtains, soft and golden, and I let it wash over me like a benediction. Peace, I realized, didn't come in a rush. It arrived slowly, like water seeping into dry soil. Grandpa stopped by with groceries, humming some old tune as he unpacked apples and bread into my kitchen. "You look better," he said, handing me one of the apples. His eyes searched mine and I could tell he saw it, the space where the chains had been. I smiled. "I feel better." The phone still buzzed sometimes, voicemails, messages, threats, but they didn't pierce me anymore. I had blocked numbers, changed accounts, redrawn the lines. Their words, once heavy as lead, now fell like dust against a closed window. The silence wasn't empty. It was mine. Days settled into rhythm. I went for walks, slow and steady, relearning how to breathe without panic clawing at my chest. I read books I hadn't touched in years. I cooked for myself. Nothing extravagant, just meals that tasted like care instead of survival. For the first time in forever, my reflection didn't startle me. My eyes looked clearer. My face less strained. I wasn't the family's mule anymore. I was just Evelyn, and that was enough. Of course, the storm wasn't gone entirely. Letters came. Melissa's threats shifted to pleas, then back to venom. Paige's guilt turned into silence. Mom and Dad tried once more. Dad's voice over voicemail, full of that same authority he wielded like a weapon. But now I understood. Their emergencies weren't mine to solve. Their survival wasn't my duty. My duty was to myself. And that clarity was unshakable. One evening I sat on the porch with Grandpa, the summer air heavy with the smell of rain. He handed me a cup of tea and said, "Funny thing about peace, it doesn't mean the world stops demanding. It means you stop answering to what doesn't deserve you." I let his words settle. He was right. Peace wasn't the absence of noise. It was the choice to step outside of it. The next day I woke up early and watched the sunrise paint the sky in streaks of fire and gold. A thought drifted through me, simple but profound. I survived. Not just the collapse at work. Not just the abandonment in the hospital. I survived them, and more importantly, I survived myself. The part of me that believed I had to earn love by breaking my own body. The part that thought silence was safety. Now, silence was strength. As the sun climbed higher, I whispered to the morning, "It's over." And for the first time, I believed it. The peace wasn't borrowed. It wasn't fragile. It was mine forever.